Ah, yes, economics. Everybody's favorite human science. And if you think otherwise, you're obviously kidding yourself. I mean, who doesn't love drawing our beloved supply and demand diagrams? Or talking about our totally realistic and perfect fiscal and monetary policy? Or reading those facts and figures that you see on the newspaper and actually think that you understand what they mean? The whole concept of economics seems perfect, doesn't it? The study of how we need to use our limited resources to maximize society's benefit. Personally, I think that this is the single most important issue we as humanity face, just because of how this in itself lends itself to millions of other problems. And so the job of the economist is to try to minimize this problem. They would give advice to maybe the local government or a local organization about what they should do to try to minimize this problem. So, for example, they would give a government advice about how people would react following a certain event. So, just a generic example, how they would react to a fall in interest rates. But that sounds pretty complicated, right? To say the very least. I mean, these are resources and people of an entire economy ranging up to the size of a country or even many countries. Don't people react differently? Don't we all have different emotions and different knowledge about different subjects? Besides that, don't we all have different priorities in life? We've all been brought up by different communities and different social norms. I mean, how could economists possibly make any predictions at all about how we'll react? And so the job of the economist is made much more difficult because of the individuality and uniqueness of everybody in the world. So what did economists do to make their jobs easier and their lives possible? That's right. They assume that you, me, and everybody in the world are the same person. The whole idea of mainstream economics is based around the assumption of rational economic man. It's the idea that we as people fully and entirely consider all the decisions we have available to us, that we always and successfully maximize our individual benefit and individual utility, and we do so without any moral and emotional disruptions. Now, you're probably thinking to yourself, how can you make this assumption at all? Don't you involve emotion and moral all the time in your decisions? Well, from some twisted rationale point of view, yes, this does make sense. It is our animalistic and innate tendency to try to seek self-salvation, to maximize our own individual benefit. But yes, ultimately, what this assumption does is it does demote everybody in an economy into emotionless, hedonistic, pleasure-seeking machines. The only thing that economists assume we do is seek pleasure. It's removed the human element from this human science. So let me ask you a question to hopefully convey this point a bit better. So on the board here, it's a hypothetical gamble. Let's say you walk into a casino, quite a strange casino to be offering you these odds, but ignore that for a second. So you may choose between scenario A and scenario B. Scenario A says you have an 80% chance of earning 45 Singapore dollars and a 20% chance of earning nothing. Scenario B says you have a 100% guarantee of getting 30. So I'll give you a couple of seconds, try to make a decision. Okay, hopefully the 5 seconds I just counted in my head were enough for you to make a decision. An economist would say that everybody in the world would go for the first option. Reason being, because mathematically speaking, it does maximize your utility. When you apply each of the payouts to the probabilities for each of these scenarios, you find that scenario A is worth $36 and scenario B is worth 30. So yes, you should choose scenario A if you're seeking to maximize your individual benefit. So if you chose scenario B, I'm sorry, you're just not as good as rational economic man. But don't take offense by that. In fact, if anything, it makes you more human. Because when the pioneers of behavioral economics, Kahneman and Tversky, conducted this experiment on a small group of people, they found that most went for the latter option. The main driving reason for this is that we as people are risk averse. We are scared of losing. Scenario B here represents a guarantee that you'll definitely get 30 Singapore dollars. Scenario A logically is more worthy and has more value, but that 20% chance of earning nothing when you could have earned 30 Singapore dollars, that scares us. And so Kahneman further developed this idea of how we make decisions through his systems of thinking. So he divided them up into system 1 and system 2. I like to think of system 1 as the more party animal, indulgent, hype decision-making system. It's the one that you use when you want to make a decision quick and effortlessly. So, for example, you may see a Coke can with your name on it and you're like, oh my gosh, that's the coolest thing ever. I've got to go buy one. Maybe you didn't even want a Coke can in the first place, but just the fact that it had your name on it, that's what made you want to go buy one. That's irrational. Why would you want to get something you didn't want to get in the first place? It's a waste of money. It's the thinking that you used in the gamble trick above. It took advantage of your risk aversion and hence exploited your system one thinking. System two, on the other hand, is the slower, more wise and deliberate decision-making system. It's when you want to make deep and meaningful decisions. So hence, your brain would allocate more energy and more time into making these decisions, which is precisely the reason why we tend to use the first system more than any of the others. It is that we don't want to spend too much effort and energy into making such a simple decision like what you're going to have for lunch or which toothpaste brand you're going to use next. Especially in a world with growing stimuli all around us, we're going to be using System 1 much more than System 2. Marketing companies constantly take advantage of all your inherent biases built into your psychologies. And it's precisely this reason why we tend to not act rationally. Not because we don't want to, but because we fail to act rationally. System 1 is extremely fallible, and since you're using it more, you're more likely to be irrational than rational at all. And so, to conclude, unfortunately, the time constraints of this talk has meant that I cannot fully convey to you all the imperfections our current model of economics has, such as the complete lack of emotion or the lack of aspect of social networking and social pressures, as aforementioned in communities and peers forcing you to do something. But I hope to have at least conveyed to you the room for improvement we currently have with our model. If we cannot assume that we as people are not machines and emotionless, then how can policymaking even be remotely possible? We're going to be constantly wrong with what we say, which is precisely why we need a change in how we think. We need to assume that we are people, not machines. A lot of what I presented today is already growing more and more into the mainstream in a branch called behavioral economics, and is steadily gaining more and more support each day, can be found readily available online. So that hopefully one day we could finally bring back the human element into everybody's favorite human science. Thank you.